Support for the Heel Tough Blog podcast comes from Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Look, guys, we've all been there. We've all been trimming. All of a sudden, we clip something we don't want to clip. You don't want to do that. Make sure you take care of your downstairs area, just like the Tar Heels have to make sure they take care of Sam Howell. We don't want to have to put the backup in. And guess what? There's no backup for your balls. So that's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their Lawnmower 2.0 has proprietary skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't nick or snag your nuts. That's right, manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past, and come on, guys, don't use the same trimmer on your face that you're using on your balls. Let's just be honest, that is disgusting. Manscaped also has the Crop Preserver, an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer, so you don't have to use any of those powders or whatever. You already put deodorant on your armpits. Why not put deodorant on the smelliest part of your body? Right now, you can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGHEADS. That's all one word, BIGHEADS, at manscaped.com. Always use the right tools for the job. Your balls will thank you. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BIGHEADS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code BIGHEADS to get your Manscaped product today.
Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind it. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way. At the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is gonna take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty.
This is the Heel Tough Blog podcast, Big Heads Media Podcast. Hey guys, and welcome into this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. And guys, we are back on the recruiting trail. It isn't the end of the season just yet, thankfully. The Tar Heels still have a bowl game coming up. They will take on Temple in the Military Bowl on December 27th. But we are reaching a crucial stretch for the Tar Heels 2020 recruiting class. And so we are going to have a lot of recruiting podcasts coming up to make sure that we have you guys covered with everything. The first one will start tonight, where we will talk about Clyde Pinder Jr. and Jacolby Criswell, whose commitments maybe aren't as solid as we once thought they were. So we'll get into that. We'll kind of talk back and forth between the two, and we'll let you know who we think out of the two would be a bigger loss for the Tar Heels if they were to step away, and then we'll have some other stuff that we'll wrap up at the end. But first, we want to welcome in Zack Hubbard, our recruiting analyst here for the Heel Tough Blog. Zack, how's it been going, man? It's been a while, but now that we're in the off season, it's time to focus back on recruiting.
Absolutely. Glad to be back. Glad to be talking to some recruiting. You know, this type of year, it's always pretty busy, tons of information. So glad to be back, and glad to really get down and see sort of where these guys are looking around at.
Well, we've got a crucial time coming up here for this 2020 class, really the most crucial time with the early signing period now being in place. Of course, that will start on December 18th. It'll end on December 20th. It's the 3-day window, a little bit different than, of course, the February window that we were all used to for so long. But the Tar Heels, as of right now, have 24 guys that are just about definite to sign in the early period. Now, that does not mean that they will early enroll because of the amount of guys that are leaving. At one point earlier this season, due to graduations, I think the number was 12. That might go up with transfers, so there might be some other early enrollee spots. But there are some guys like Des Evans, the 4-star weak side defensive end, or now I think back up to 5-star. It's been all over the place with where they've had him. I think he's now a composite 5-star once again. But he is going to stay at Lee County High School, as well as Jaden Chalmers. They're going to play, I know that Des is going to play basketball this year and will graduate in June. So there's some guys that, don't get too concerned. As long as they sign in the early period, they'll be fine. They just might not early enroll. But there are 2 guys that at one time were pretty solid to signing early in the class. We're really excited to potentially get on campus early. And now, all of a sudden, due to some new offers and some other things that have been going on, have kind of been taking a look elsewhere. But we'll start with the guy out of the state of Florida, which is Clyde Pinder Jr. We'll start with him because he took his official visit to campus over the weekend, was there from the 6th until the 8th. And, look, he's 1 week ahead of some of the major official visits. Really, this week is when most of the guys are going to be on campus, but he was on campus with a couple of guys that are committed in the class. DJ Jones, as well as Cameron Roseman Sinclair, were on campus this past weekend. Both those guys are very solid to Carolina, but it does mean that the final week before the early signing period opens, he does have free. So some are wondering whether or not he will be taking a visit to Florida or maybe somewhere else. And there are some people that are concerned because he did go to Gainesville for the Florida State-Florida game. Reportedly, he said that it was only for family, not for him, because his family were big Gator fans when they grew up. Was just kind of wanting to go through the experience with some of his family members so they could get sort of an inside look at Florida football, which was something cool that he could have done. That's what he told Don Callahan of Inside Carolina. So, it's definitely interesting. Where do you think right now Pinder kind of stands on his commitment? Because this was a guy that seemed solid for a while, but taking that visit to Gainesville after getting the offer just a couple of weeks earlier definitely throws a little bit of a wrench into the plans for Carolina.
Absolutely, and I think that you have to look at it from a couple angles. But Pinder's been pretty upfront with the fact that these visits, or whether this visit in particular was, one for family, not anything that Tar Heel fans and the coaching staff should be worried about. Then at a later date said, well, maybe I do want to take some official visits. Maybe, in late December or in January. Maybe I don't want to sign in the early signing period and want to take it all the way to February. So that was definitely some cause for concern. Now, as you said, did take his official visit this past weekend, is looking to be pretty firm. Coaching staff feels good about having that firmed up with him. Now, changing his plan back to signing in that early signing period. And I think sort of when you look at the 2 angles, really with that Florida visit, they're probably the main competition right now for his signature if he was going to take other visits. And you sort of have to look at the 2 angles. As a Florida native, obviously there's going to be the in-state angle of playing close to home, everything along those lines. In terms of what their pitch is, they could argue, I would say, what Florida would argue would be maybe a greater national perspective. But when you look at the UNC side, this UNC coaching staff, the way they've recruited so far in this class is they've locked in on guys that they've really wanted, and they've put their attention almost solely on those guys. And Pinder is included in that, of being essentially the staff's only target at the nose guard position. And when you look at the roster coming up, in terms of scholarship defensive linemen, they're still on the roster. There's really only one true guy that we know 100% is going to play nose guard in 2020, and redshirt sophomore, Jaleel Taylor. Now, maybe Zach Gill moves in there. Maybe you get one of the freshman guys like Kevin Hester or Wisdom Asaburo that moves in there to the inside slot. We really only know of one. So I think one of UNC's major selling points here is playing time. It does look like that, if Pinder was to sign and come in 2020, it's pretty wide open for that backup nose guard spot. As a defensive lineman, they're going to rotate a lot. They're going to get playing time. So I think UNC has really got an advantage there in terms of what they can offer with playing time. Plus, taking a look real quick at Florida's commitment list, they do have 4 defensive tackles currently committed. We're looking to have 5 or 6 committed in the class to rebuild their defensive line. I believe they run a 4-3, so obviously a lot of possessions for these guys to fill into. But, UNC can offer earlier playing time and really a more, consistent message, a home field that they've provided since he committed in the summer. So at this point in the process, I would feel pretty good about him signing on the 18th, along with a lot of these other guys in the class. I feel good about that now. Of course, we will have to see if he does anything this weekend, but for the time being, my prediction is going to be that he sticks in the class.
Right, and as of right now, there are no other official visits scheduled, which there's only one weekend, so that's the good news. If he was to go and schedule an official visit for this weekend, especially to Florida, I think that would be when people should start getting a little bit concerned. When you look at the landscape of the roster, I think this is probably going to be his best chance to play early. It's just kind of based on what is his look on it? Is he a guy that wants to come in and immediately play early? Is that something big that's playing into his commitment? If it is, then yeah, you're right. Especially with Brant Lawless-Sherrill now saying that he's going to enter the transfer portal. You're right. I mean, you look at the roster. Jaleel Taylor's really your only guy that is going to be a nose guard. I know some people would say, well, what about Kedrick Bingley-Jones? He is not a nose tackle. I've seen him play. He's definitely a guy that's going to fit more of that 3-4-4-eye technique type defensive end. I think he's the perfect fit for that role, just from seeing him multiple times this year. You look at some of the other guys. You talked about Zach Gill. The thing with Zach Gill is he might be needed in the 4-eye technique spot that's going to be left behind by Jason Strobridge. So, you don't really know if you're going to have the ability to move him over. You talked about a guy like Wisdom Asaburo. It'll be interesting to see what he becomes, because I remember Wisdom, really a thinner framed guy, definitely has a lot of size on him. I believe, if I remember correctly on the exact size, he's 6'6", 6'7", really big guy, but really doesn't fit that definition of a nose tackle that you want. Whereas Clyde Pinder fits that to the T. 6'1.5", 303 pounds, a guy that can really clog up space. But the other good thing about him is very similar to what Aaron Crawford does. Not only will he take up a lot of space in the middle of that defense, he also does a great job of being able to get after the quarterback. He is a little bit more athletic than people will probably give him credit for, and he's got that bull in a china shop mentality that you love from your nose tackles. That's what can make guys that, go from just being able to slow down the run, being able to get after the quarterback and create issues. And that's the thing. Carolina this past year, as we saw with the season going along, you saw the drop-off in production from the outside pass rushers. Now, there are going to be some new guys coming in this year that people, just based on recruiting ranking, think will be a lot better, will be able to get after the quarterback more consistently. But you would like to have a guy in Pinder who can do that from the nose tackle position too, which was what they got this year from Aaron Crawford. So, I think you're right. The best case scenario is make sure that you get him locked down in this early period, because you would feel like if he ends up delaying his decision to February, that really has the feel at that point of he's probably going to flip to Florida. And the biggest issue is that becomes the biggest position of need if he ends up flipping. And without a doubt, they've got to get somebody in there. One of the guys that is, still a target for them right now, and I don't know how big of a target he really is Octavius Oxendine, the 3-star defensive tackle out of the state of Kentucky. He was a guy that took an official visit during the season, and as of right now, I think is probably going to stick in the state of Kentucky, but I wonder if the Tar Heels have contacted him and maybe have started to, heat some things up just a little bit with the uncertainty around Pinder. But the other guy that we got to talk about real quick, and then we will we'll kind of talk about which one of the two is the bigger loss in the class, if for some reason they are to step away, is the quarterback in the class 2020 4-star dual threat Jacolby Criswell, a guy that just continues to be on the rise. Fantastic season at Morrilton High School, out of the state of Arkansas. And this is a recruitment that we knew might have changed a little bit when Auburn came in and offered, but I don't think Auburn is the biggest threat anymore. Now it looks like it is going to be Arkansas, who just hired Georgia offensive line coach Sam Pittman to take over the head coaching job. Biggest reason why they hired Sam Pittman, not only is he a good offensive line coach, he is one of the best recruiters in the entire country. And much like Mack a year ago, he has hit the grounds running and had an in-home visit today with Jacolby Criswell. So this is one that I think, coming into the week, before I knew that Criswell was going to be having this in-home visit, I was a little more concerned about Pinder's recruitment. Now Pinder goes on campus, seems to firm his recruitment or his commitment up a little bit. Criswell, on the other hand, it seems like it might be going in a little bit of a different direction, wouldn't you say?
I would say it's definitely more contentious right now for Criswell's recruitment than compared to Pinder. Pinder, with having his official visit this past weekend, seems to be a little bit more shored up. I mean, you mentioned sort of the numerous angles here. Criswell, who's been committed since June, was offensive coordinator Phil Longo's really primary quarterback target in this class, even when he was at Ole Miss,
right,
and carried that over when he took the job here in North Carolina, then became North Carolina's top QB target. Really fits the mold of what Coach Longo wants to do with the quarterback in his offense. Has a big arm, but also has the ability to, stretch out a defense with the run from that sort of read option game or RPO game that they like to implement. So really a guy that I think UNC was really happy to have when he committed, but obviously there's a little bit of, other players entering the mix sort of near October, November, when Auburn backup quarterback Joey Gatewood transferred. There was kind of some talk of, is Auburn going to switch on him being the primary quarterback target in this class? There was some talk about that for a while, but Criswell ended up really not visiting with the Auburn staff. Seems like they're going to go in a different direction, especially with the hire today of new Auburn OC Chad Morris. Chad Morris has a son that's a quarterback, highly rated 4-star quarterback in this class in Chandler Morris. So it seems like Auburn's going to go more that way with their new offensive coordinator's son being their quarterback in this class. So really over the past few days, we've seen Arkansas become a big competitor for Criswell. As an Arkansas native, obviously that would be his sort of in-state, hometown team that he would have watched growing up. He has a cousin, I believe, or brother rather, of Drake Greenlaw, that was an Arkansas linebacker now in the NFL with the 49ers. So there's a lot of connections that he has already to Arkansas. Just didn't really have a lot of interest when Chad Morris was there this past season.
Right.
Obviously, with a 10-2 record, didn't really have a great start to that tenure. Obviously saw him get fired this past year. So it's really sort of picked up as we saw Sam Pittman take this job. Sam Pittman is sort of a native of the area, has connections in the area, was, like you said, a monster recruiter at UGA. So potentially, a new face on this program. And I really think that the angle that Arkansas is going to try to sell here over the next few days is, hey, with the type of offense that we'll most likely want to run, which will most likely be, a lot of this RPO spread offense that we see throughout college football everywhere, that's something that we really want to implement here. And I think that they can sell him on early playing time, similar to what UNC sold on Sam Howell last year. Basically selling, it's an open competition in the fall. You can come in and compete for playing time early. And I think that could be a big factor over the next, couple days to get his signature, as it does look like that, there's potential for him to sign early or go late. Now, I think the main thing going in UNC's favor would be the length of the relationship relationships involved. I mean, as Coach Longo's primary target for several years now, in his role as an offensive coordinator at different schools, there's a big built-in relationship there that Arkansas just doesn't have. I mean, Arkansas at this point doesn't even have an offensive coordinator committed or a quarterback's coach or anything like that. So really all they can sell is a basic idea and a basic scheme that's coming from this head coach. A very good recruiter as a head coach, but just a head coach, no staff in place, no thought to roster or anything like that at this point. Really, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, though, is that, coming out of this weekend, the general plan for Criswell with UNC was that he does have an official visit scheduled to come to Chapel Hill this coming weekend. Signing day would be the upcoming Wednesday. His plan at the time was to take his official visit and then to sign that next Wednesday on the early signing day. Now, tonight was his in-home with Sam Pittman, or this afternoon, rather. So he's had that meeting. What Tar Heel fans need to watch for over the next few days is, does Criswell come to Chapel Hill on his official visit over the weekend? And does he continue with that plan to sign in the early signing period? I think those are the two big things that you're going to need to happen to feel really good about this. The longer the recruitment goes, the less good that you can probably feel about how this commitment's going to go, just because of that big sell of early playing time and being playing for the hometown team, the in-state team. So I think that UNC's really got to push for that over the next few days. Those are really the two big factors to push for. If I had to put an estimation on it today, I would say that he sticks, just based on the timeline being so close to early signing day. It's going to be hard for Arkansas to really build those relationships, and I think that's going to be really important here. But they do have a really big sell and a really appealing sell, so it's one that we'll definitely need to watch over the coming days.
Yeah, I mean, look, they got their head coach Sam Pittman in late in the going here for the early signing period. This is the new challenge with the early signing period. That's the reason why, more than likely, if teams are thinking, okay, this really isn't our guy, you're going to see coaches start to get fired mid-season. Now, the thing is you could say, well, maybe they don't have enough time to come in and turn his commitment towards them. There's two aspects to look at with this. Remember, we would have said the same thing last year, or this is probably what Florida State fans were saying last year when we were talking about Sam Howell's commitment, because Mack Brown and his staff, now granted they did get in a little bit earlier, but even so, that's still a really short period of time to work with. And the other thing is I don't really think that is what Sam Pittman's going to focus on here with Criswell. His focus is not, we need to get him committed in the early period. It would be nice, but unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get him in there in the early period, barring something extremely shocking and just a complete change of mind from Criswell. You're going to have to put in some legwork. As you mentioned, they don't have an offensive coordinator or even a quarterback's coach in place just yet. So what they're looking at is, let's make this decision last until February, and if they can do that, I think they feel like they've got a really good shot. You mentioned that Auburn pretty much out of it now. Yeah, I would say they're almost 100% out of it, because I would be just unbelievably shocked if Chandler Morris doesn't end up going with his dad to Auburn. I think that was kind of something that Auburn knew when they ended up signing him, and they already have a quarterback committed in their class of 2020, as well as the class of 2021. They have their quarterback as well. So I think Auburn's pretty set. That's the good news, is that they seem to be out of the running for Criswell. But yeah, the biggest threat right now is Arkansas. And look, it's a known thing that Criswell has said for a while. He wants to be a guy that can represent the home state and represent Arkansas. It was just, I don't feel like he, first of all, with Chandler Morris committed at Arkansas, I don't feel like he thought he was going to be able to come in there and overtake him. And, I don't know if Chad Morris, even if he didn't have a son in that class, would have been able to wrap up his commitment, because it just didn't feel like there was a really close tie between him and the staff at Arkansas. Now, already you can see that they're making him a priority. And like you said, I mean, how much you wonder with him, how does playing time factor in? Because it's a little bit different than with what we saw when we were talking about Pinder, where Pinder's going to have an opportunity to come in and play a lot. He also plays at a position where you rotate players. They don't rotate players at quarterback unless there's an injury. And Sam Howell right now is, just lighting the world on fire. We know, we've been talking about it a lot here on this podcast. And honestly, look, both of these guys have had really successful seasons. Sam at the college level and Criswell at the prep level. And I think that's honestly kind of hurting Carolina's chances here, believe it or not. The success of Criswell now becoming a solid 4-star prospect at quarterback, being an Elite 11 guy, having a really successful year, and with Sam Howell showing that he's not giving up the job anytime soon. You got to remember, Sam's going to be here for at least 2 more years. I think Criswell is seeing that and saying, okay, well, there's not really a whole lot of space to play here. If I go to Arkansas, I mean, look, unless there's just somebody that comes out of the woodworks there, it looks like that's pretty much a wide open job next year, unless they land a big name transfer that hits the market or something. It's going to be open to whoever steps in the fall and and has a chance to compete for that job. Criswell is a guy that, just from seeing the statistics and hearing everything that we've heard from a lot of the people, this is a really, really good football player, and is a guy that Phil Longo's been targeting for a reason. He feels like he fits his offense pretty well, and we've seen how special the Phil Longo offense can be. So, the biggest thing for Carolina, like you said, he will take his official visit this weekend. He is going to be on campus with commits that he has been around for a long, long time. A lot of these guys have been going to games all year. They've been in contact with them. You wonder if they can just kind of, the staff's going to try to sell it too, but you wonder if the guys around him are going to be able to stick in this class, and we're a part of something special. It'll be interesting to see, and I'm with you. I think we're going to learn pretty quickly after he's on campus for his visit what decision he will make, because he'll get off campus on Sunday and then turn around, and he'll pretty much have to have his decision made probably Monday or Tuesday as to whether or not he will take part in the early signing period. So the good news is that out of all of that, look, Monday and Tuesday, I believe are dead periods. I don't know if you can contact players up until then. I don't remember the exact NCAA recruiting schedule, but the Tar Heels will get the last swing. Is that, what kind of impression can they make, and how big does that weigh on the mind, I think will be the ultimate question. So, that we kind of have gone through each guy, kind of told you where we think they stand at. Now the biggest question is out of the two, if one of them was to decommit in this class, which one of these two do you think would be the biggest decommitment for the Tar Heels? Which one do you think could hurt the class the most?
I think you have to look at a few different angles. It's different positions, quarterback and nose guard, so you really have to determine what's more important. I think most people would argue quarterback in this instance. These are two guys that I feel like there's a decent chance, if not good chance, for both of them to compete for the backup spot at their given position. Right. Like we mentioned with Clyde Pinder, there's not really another guy on the roster that we're seeing right now that's a clear-cut, backup nose guard right now in terms of the quarterback position. Sam Howell is a very entrenched starter. Of course, you do have Jace Ruder there. He would be the expected backup, but with injury history, you don't really know yet what he's going to be like in the spring. So I think that there would definitely be a chance, and just based on the skill that he has coming out of high school, that Criswell, could compete for that backup position. With the depth that we've seen at both positions, it's easier to not have a backup nose guard than it is to not have a backup quarterback. I think that's pretty clear, just with the way that you rotate defensive linemen. You'll have some packages in which you have multiple defensive ends and don't necessarily have a nose guard on the field. In offense, you don't really have that option with a quarterback unless you're going to, play wildcat the whole time or just do read options the whole time. So with that, in terms of the greatest decommitment, I think it would have to be Criswell just based on the position involved. I think that both would definitely be a loss. I think they're two of the most important commits in this class. But it's really hard for me to go against quarterback being the most important, especially sort of with the outlook in the future to get a quarterback and just with the nature of the quarterback game today with the transfer portal and everything along those lines. You hope to get one and recruit him and develop him in-house as best you can. So I'd say he's probably my pick. I'd love to hear who you think is going to be who would be the bigger loss amongst these two.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. When you talk about the quarterback position, you definitely do not want to get back to what we saw late in the Larry Fedora era. It is key to bring a quarterback in each class. So I agree that is a big concern. I'm actually going to go with Pinder, though, and I'll tell you why. There's a few different reasons that I've been thinking about since this kind of popped into my mind. When you look at Clyde Pinder, just in terms of where he's going to fit in his position, especially if he enrolls early, he would come in and have a chance to start. There is real potential. I've seen some things out of Jaleel Taylor, but he's not a guy that if you got someone in there to compete with him, you would say, okay, there's no chance that anybody's going to beat him out. He just really hasn't proven himself to that level just yet. And that's good. You want that to happen so it creates some competition. But, I mean, you mentioned it. Who is that guy behind Pinder, if he ends up leaving the class? Who's the guy on the roster that would then take over behind Jaleel Taylor or compete with Jaleel Taylor? It doesn't really feel like there is one. At that point, that likely means that the Tar Heels would have to turn to the transfer portal, or then they're going to have to scramble to try to find a nose guard somewhere out there in at the end of this 2020 class. Now, that wouldn't be the worst thing because, as we've seen with this staff, they have the ability to scramble and find guys. But, I mean, this is a guy that you've had committed to the class for a while, has been one of the guys that not only has done a good job, staying committed and sort of communicating with all the other guys in the class, he's also tried to help you lock down some commitments. So he's been a really big part of this 2020 class for a while. He seems to fit everything that you want to do with your scheme, and losing him in the middle would be huge. The other reason that I think that Pinder would be a little bit bigger is because when it comes to the 2020 class, I really don't think that people are looking at the fact that Jefferson Boaz is committed in this class to Carolina. And I know that everybody sees that 24/7 Sports lists him as a tight end. It's really hard to say the guy that's 6'7" and in the 200s is listed as an athlete, but he really is. Just from, I remember back in June when he was at the Mac Brown camp, he ran at both tight end, linebacker, even did a little bit of quarterback stuff. And then I actually went out and saw him this year for East Surrey's game against Reedsville, which was their biggest test of the season, and I watched him put on a show. I'm going to tell you, just from watching him, and I know that some of the people are going to say, well, he plays at a lower level, 1A, the 1A level, playing for the 1AA state championship this upcoming weekend. Look, this guy, just from watching his mechanics, he looks like a guy that if he had to play quarterback, he could. And the staff has talked to him about playing quarterback. Pretty much, they've got a guy in the class that if Criswell stays committed, he can play elsewhere. They could play him at tight end. They could play him at linebacker. There's so many different things that they could do with him. But if they lose Criswell, they do have a guy, they have a backup plan. So that's where I think, if you look at which one of these two would be the bigger loss, I don't think they have a backup plan right now for Pinder in this class, because no matter how many times I've seen him, I just don't see a defensive tackle in Kedrick Bingley-Jones. That's just not the way that he plays. I feel like he's that 4-eye technique, but I think that Boaz, if needed, could play quarterback. I don't know how successful he could be. I don't know if he's on the same level as Criswell. I don't think so. I think Criswell definitely is a more gifted quarterback, but I think that Boaz is a guy that if you needed him to come in and play, he is definitely better than your this year true freshman walk-ons. Next year, it'll be redshirt freshman walk-ons. And, I don't think he might. I think Jace Ruder might still beat him out, but this is still a guy that if you needed to come in and play some snaps for you, I don't think it would be the end of the world. So that's the reason I'm going to lean with Clyde Pinder. But I think we can both agree that these two guys, like you said, very important pieces to this class. You want to keep both of them in place, and it'll be interesting to see if they do. And we'll of course be covering everything with these two guys as well as all of the other guys that are scheduled to sign in the early signing period. Of course, we will be back to preview the early signing period. We'll do that sometime early next week, probably Monday or Tuesday for you guys, so that we can have you guys ready to go for the early signing period. So we'll turn to some of the other stuff that I wanted to touch on really quick before we get out of here. One guy that I know you probably want to talk about a lot, and we can talk about him here for just a second, Trenton Simpson, the 2020 4-star linebacker. Yes, he's still a 4-star, became a Rivals 5-star last week, but ESPN is the only thing that's preventing him. They have him ranked as the 107th player in the country. That could not be more false. I've seen him, in camps. I've seen him play in games multiple times, and this kid is definitely not a 4-star guy. I think he's a 5-star guy. Like I said, I said it on Twitter sometime last week when we were talking amongst some of the fans and everything. I've seen both guys play, both him and Des Evans out at Lee County High School. I think he's the better of the two prospects. I really think he's that good. And the good news is that the Tar Heels, as of right now, still the heavy favorites for him. He is going to make his decision on December 18th, barring something extremely last minute. I think he's going to hold on to that decision and go ahead and make it on the first day of the early signing period. And I mean, look, some believe that he's still waiting on the Clemson offer, but I don't. At this point, I mean, look, you're closing in on a week away. We're officially a week tomorrow. Clemson still has not offered him yet. It feels like Clemson still thinks that they're in the driver's seat for Justin Flo, so I'm not sure if they're going to end up offering him. But Zach, where do you feel confidence-wise with Trenton Simpson's recruitment right now? Is this something that you feel pretty confident with going into what will probably be the most important decision remaining in this 2020 class for the Tar Heels?
I do feel pretty confident. I do want to say beforehand, I do want to echo your point. I think that Trent is a 5-star prospect at really either linebacker position, whether they put him inside or outside. Like you, I probably would put him just a tiny bit ahead of Des Evans even. I know that some Tar Heel fans might be surprised to hear that. They could look at, Des Evans' ranking and see, well, he's a composite 5-star. Go watch the tape for Trenton Simpson. That is what a 5-star linebacker looks like. But moving on from there to his recruitment, UNC has been the heavy favorite since he decommitted from Auburn, but really it's been two schools that have been in the discussion, like you mentioned, UNC and Clemson. But as you mentioned, Clemson hasn't offered. Their numbers right now are kind of tight in terms of linebacker. They would like to add one, but it's really going into that early signing period. At this point, even still, it only looks like that they're only going to be able to sign one guy, and they'd like to have one or the other. Now, the primary target for Clemson, like you mentioned, is going to be Justin Flo. I believe this past weekend or the weekend before, took sort of a surprise last-minute official visit to the University of Southern California. They're sort of near where he lives in Upland, California. So kind of concern there from the Clemson side, which sources say, sort of led them to reach out, gauge their interest with Trenton. So obviously something that UNC is kind of monitoring, wanting to see sort of what, that interest is going to be. On the Clemson side of it, I do know that they still feel some level of confidence with Trenton. Do feel like, if they offered even up until signing day, that they would have a chance for him to sign that next day. Now, I myself, I have a little trouble believing that just based on the timeline. It's hard to say, that a kid would get an offer one day and sign with that program the next. I do think there's legitimate interest in Clemson. I mean, they're the defending national champion. They're a consistent playoff team. It's not hard to understand why a kid of his caliber would be interested. But I think at this point, just throughout the past couple weeks and months, as he's consistently attended UNC games and been in contact with, the players and prospects and coaches, all this focus from the UNC side, really for the past month, he's been their number one top guy in the 2020 class that's uncommitted, just because they have so many guys already committed. So the focus has been entirely on him and building that relationship that we sort of mentioned that were built with, Pinder and Criswell. This staff is big on relationships. And I think that that's going to be the key factor going into that early signing day. He just has better relationships in Chapel Hill with the staff, with the commits, with the players. Clemson is always going to be a factor until that, a signed letter of intent is sent in. But I feel like at the end of the day, barring anything unforeseen, I feel confident about him. The choice being UNC and him signing with UNC on that date when he commits December 18th.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's a lot of people that have kind of focused in on the fact that this was a dream school for him, really since a young age. But I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't know, even if they were to pop the offer last minute. I mean, how are you just going to go from, okay, I've been on campus for official visits to some of these other schools and everything, but this school that just offered me, I'm now going to switch my commitment over to them, and this is where I'm going to go without even taking an official visit to campus. I don't know if that's possible. I think if Clemson was to offer, relatively soon, I would say probably within the next 3 or 4 days, he might end up pushing his commitment back to February. But I also think that he's pretty sold on making his decision now and trying to get in somewhere as an early enrollee so he can come in and have some sort of effect. Like you mentioned, yeah, Clemson's class really is pretty packed so far. And yeah, they're only looking to add one linebacker in the class. They've made that pretty well known throughout all of the recruiting community that, look, we want one linebacker, and if Justin Flo is willing to come to Clemson, that will be our guy. The big blow for Clemson, they thought that Clay Helton was going to be fired at USC, just like probably most of the country thought. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I think that maybe there is a little bit of uneasiness right now amongst Clemson fans. I still feel like, just from, kind of following his commitment on the outside, I would still say he's probably a lean towards Clemson, but I think that the appeal of staying home is going to be interesting, like we talked about with both of the guys that are committed in our class that are potentially looking elsewhere. But Clemson, you got to hand it to Clemson. They're playing this about as smart as they could. They're, not sort of, offending Justin Flo by offering Trenton Simpson just yet. They're making sure that they're telling Flo, look, we haven't offered anybody else. You're still our only focus. But at the same time, they're still keeping a leash on Simpson and kind of letting him know, like, hey, we could still offer you at some point. We're not 100% sure on Flo's commitment, so just be ready. We could offer you, and that could alter, what you're potentially looking at in terms of offers. So, it's interesting. I think it's going to be a couple of nail-biting days here. I think the key is look, if the Tar Heels can get to at least early next week, probably Monday, without an offer from Clemson for Trenton Simpson, I think that they are probably in in really good shape. They should feel really confident, and it would look like he's going to be a part of the class. You kind of said it there too. It's really only down to 2 schools for him. I don't think that there is anybody else that's in the race. I know that there's some people at Auburn that are trying to say that maybe Auburn's still in it. No, Auburn's not in that race. Georgia at one time looked like they might be trying to push for him. That is pretty much all gone. It's down to 2 schools. If he gets the offer from Clemson, we'll see whether or not that will change anything. Even still, when he gets the offer from Clemson, Carolina might be the favorite. If he doesn't get the offer from Clemson, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that he will be going to Carolina. So there is reason to be confident that the Tar Heels will add another huge commitment to this already great 2020 class. So just a couple other things I want to touch on before we get out of here. 6 scholarship commits will play for their state title this weekend. Des Evans, Jaden Chalmers from Lee County High School will take on one of the best players in the 2021 class and the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of North Carolina in Will Shipley. He's a guy that is a Tar Heel target, and is a guy that we'll probably be talking about a lot after we close down this 2020 class. So that should be an extremely interesting matchup for those guys as they look for their first state championship. Jefferson Boaz and Steven Gosnell, as well as preferred walk-on commit Landon Stevens. Those 3 guys are going to be going for the 1AA state title as they look to avenge last year's state championship loss to Tarboro. That will not be an easy game considering Tarboro is one of the most dominant teams in the state over the last few years. Speaking of dominant teams in the state of North Carolina, Malik McGowan and Charlotte Catholic, they will be going up against Southern Nash High School as they look for their 3rd straight state championship. They survived a just unbelievable game in the semifinals, a game that went to 7 overtimes against Kings Mountain. So he'll look to get his 3rd championship ring. And then Elijah Green at a Blessed Trinity Catholic High School in the state of Georgia. He goes for the Georgia 4A state championship, looking for his 3rd straight ring there. He has had a phenomenal season and is one of those guys that I don't think a lot of people are talking about in this class, but is really doing some special things out there and could make an impact at running back before too long when he gets on campus. Last thing that I wanted to tell you guys before we let you go, Jaquarius Conley is headed to the Army All-American Bowl. He joins Josh Downs and Clyde Pinder, who we talked about earlier, as guys that will attend that game. Of course, last year, you guys know, Sam Howell attended that game and had a fantastic performance. So that one will be on a national television. And now Jaquarius Conley, who is one of those guys that is beginning to rise in the rankings inside the top 200 in just about every major recruiting site's rankings. He is now heading to an all-star game, so that's great to see for him. So that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Want to thank Zach for stopping by and chatting with us here. It was great to have you back on, buddy. And man, we are entering a key stretch for this Tar Heel recruiting group here, and it's extremely exciting. I'm glad we could have you back on, and you know that we're ready to go. We're ready to go, and here on the Heel Tough Blog podcast for the end of the early signing period, and glad we can have you stop back by with us.
Glad to be back this evening, and look forward to the next few days. I think there's a lot to be excited about. You look at this UNC class compared to the last few years. This 2020 class sitting at 17th in the nation, number 3 in the ACC, and is competing with SEC powerhouses and the national champion for commits. So I think that it's a good place to be in, to be a Tar Heel fan, or Tar Heel football fan specifically at this moment.
Yeah, so a lot of excitement. As we said, we'll have you covered on the Heel Tough Blog podcast with an early signing day preview. We'll also do, once the early signing period wraps up, we will do an early signing recap where we'll do some really fun stuff. We'll talk about some of our favorite guys in the class, some underrated guys in the class, and really just kind of give you a look at what we expect from a class that's just been, I mean, one of the best that we've seen in a very long time, and just an immaculate class considering, just how quickly the staff has come in and had an effect, not only on the state of North Carolina, but really in the national landscape as well. So we'll have all that for you. Of course, we'll have you covered on the Heel Tough Blog website as well with all the stuff you need for National Signing Day. We'll have the preview for National Signing Day where we'll preview what the biggest storylines are going into the day. Of course, we'll have my favorite thing that I do on National Signing Day, which will be the live feed thread. So we'll have everything covered in there. We'll have, whenever the guys sign, we'll end up posting it on there so you guys can stay with that throughout the day, and that'll update you on everything that you need to know when it comes to some of the Tar Heels' biggest prospects and if they sign their letters of intent, if they don't. Now, of course, this year it's a little bit different because there are some of the guys that are going to decide on the 19th and on the 20th. Last year it seemed like just about everybody went on the first day. This year it's a little more spread out. You can see some of the major targets also are kind of waiting. The 18th will be when most of the major guys will make their decisions because that's when, of course, ESPN does their special feature day that they do, the National Signing Day feature that they do on ESPNU. But yeah, I think that for the most part, we're going to have to keep an eye on it for a couple of days, but still, we'll have you covered with everything there. And then, of course, after it's all over, we will break down every single prospect for you, let you guys know just what you're getting in every single player. So we're hitting a key time for the Tar Heels on the recruiting trail. And, of course, after that, we'll let you know some of the maybe late class 2020 targets, and then we'll also probably turn a little bit of the focus to the 2021 class. So make sure you check out all that. HeelToughBlog.com. That's where you can check out the podcast as well. Of course, me and Josh will be back to preview the bowl game against Temple, and then we'll recap that one, lock down the season. We'll have where we'll do our postseason awards. Of course, we did the mid-season awards, so we'll do that at some point, and then there'll be a lot of great off-season features that we're going to do as well. So make sure you check that out. Also, the basketball team, we have the Roy's Boys podcast that we're doing. Of course, there's still great stuff on the website as well. You can go back, check out the recap from the game against Virginia, as well as my analysis from the game. Also, you've got, we'll have the recap edition of podcast that'll go up tomorrow. Of course, just like the Tar Heels, we seem to have no luck with the podcast. We taped it once, and unfortunately, it got somehow saved over. So unfortunately, we have to go back and suffer through the pain of recapping that Virginia game yet again. But we're going to do it for you guys. So make sure that you keep up with all that. And we'd love for you guys. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the podcast for us. We would really appreciate that as well. So thank you guys for listening to this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. We will be back next week or early next week to preview the upcoming early signing period. Until then, thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Tar Heels.